Now, going back to our discussion yesterday on classification of plants, and today with characteristics of non-vascular plants, what's one thing you can tell me about non-vascular plants? If you need to, review back into your interactive notebook. Non-vascular plants, what's something you can tell me about it? Linda, you're right there. Tell me something about a non-vascular plant. They are low-growing plants. Why are non-vascular plants low-growing plants? Okay, they don't have any way. What do we call those things? They don't have a xylem or a phloem. So, they don't have that transport system, so they have to be lower to the ground. And obviously, these here, the liverwort, the hornwort, the moss, all three of those are very low to the ground. All right? So, when we talk about characteristics of vascular plants, well, they are multicellular. Vascular plants are multicellular. Well, if we trace back, let's stop and think. Okay? Multicellular. What type of cells do you think they have? Okay? Eukaryotic. Why do you think eukaryotic? They're plants. What domain are they in? Eukarya, right? Remember our three domains. What were our three domains? Eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. So they are definitely eukaryotic cells. Once again, what does eukaryotic mean? It has a true nucleus. Okay? Has a true nucleus. Autotrophic. Non-vascular plants are autotrophic. Autotrophs make their own food using sunlight to convert certain materials into sugar and oxygen. What are the materials needed for photosynthesis besides sunlight? Carbon dioxide and water. Yeah. Okay. Carbon dioxide and water. See how much we know throughout the year? Just reviewing a little bit here. All right. So, they are autotrophs. Now, they do not have tubes. And remember, like Fletcher said earlier, when we're talking about tubes, we're talking about those transport systems. The xylem, the phloem. Okay? So, they have no roots, they have no stems, they have no leaves. No roots, no stems, no leaves. Just like Linda said earlier, they are low, excuse me, they're low-growing plants that get materials directly from the surrounding. They have to be, because they don't have the transport system. So, if they don't get their materials from their surroundings, it's not going to happen. They're not going to get it. They don't have the transport system that vascular plants have. They have to be low to the ground in order to get those materials. They have small root-like structure called rhizoids. Small root-like structures called rhizoids. Those rhizoids help to get some of the materials. They are supported by cell walls that are made of cellulose. So the cell wall of these non-vascular plants are made of cellulose. It gives them support. It also gives them a little bit of protection. These non-vascular plants will undergo sexual and asexual reproduction. They undergo sexual and asexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction happens through the formation of spores. Through the formation of spores. And the asexual reproduction, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, vegetative propagation, where you break off a small part of the plant and it forms a new plant. So basically, we're probably most familiar with mosses, right? We're probably most familiar with the mosses of between the liverwort, the hornwort, and the moss. So you saying that I could take and I could grab a little chunk of moss and transfer it over to another area and then it'd grow? What do you think? Could I do that? Could I do that? If I would put it in an area that had the conditions, remember it needs to be low to the ground so they can get their materials, right? So yeah, I could do that. That's what this whole vegetative propagation is. Breaking off that little small part of the plant and bringing it over and replanting it. Now, obviously, let's stop and think. Am I going to break off a small part of a tree and go plant it and it's going to grow? Okay, no. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen like that. But certain plants I can break off a part, you know. Am I going to break off, I've got rose bushes now. Am I going to break off a little part of the rose bush and it's going to grow elsewhere? Probably not. Now, depending on where you broke it at. Okay? I would say if you do it with a rose bush, it would kill it. Okay? But certain parts of the ivy, you've seen ivy spreading around. If I break some of the ivy off and replant it elsewhere, just so I got some of the roots, it probably would go. It would go. Now, the life cycle of a non-vascular plant. All right, the life cycle of a non-vascular plant. Okay. Now, non-vascular plants are low-growing and live in a moist environment in order to allow the diffusion of water into the plant cells. Okay? So they diffuse into the plant cell. a sporophyte. There's somewhere on that back page for sporophyte. A sporophyte is diploid, 2N. We talked about haploid. We talked about diploid, okay? A mature sporophyte, which is 2N, produces haploid spores through meiosis in the sporangia. These tiny cells are released by the sporophyte and travel by the wind until they find a suitable substrate and turn into a new plant. Okay, so you should be writing this down about the sporophyte. Okay, the sporophyte releasing spores. So if we look here, here's our diagram. What do you think these little dots are here? Okay, what do you think those little dots are? Yeah, those are the spores. Those are the spores that are being released from the sporophyte. So what do you think the sporophyte is? Well, you're going to see that this whole area from here up, that little stem-like thingy, okay, looks like a stem and a little top on it, that is the sporophyte. Okay, that is the sporophyte. We're going to do a project coming up here soon in which we're going to identify and label this particular diagram here. So we have the spores that are being released by the sporophyte. Okay, these spores are haploid. They are created by meiosis. Do you remember meiosis? We've discussed it this year. We take a diploid cell, okay? We take a diploid cell and we make it into 4 haploid cells, right? Now, these cells are released and travel through the wind until they find a suitable substrate. Okay, that suitable substrate could be something like water to help them travel down. Okay? Now, the next part of the life cycle is going to be this one right here. So find that picture here. With this picture, the gametophyte. The gametophyte, a new plant is formed. As a new plant is formed, it begins in the gametophyte haploid stage. That shouldn't be 10 right there. I think that should be in. It begins in the gametophyte stage. The gametophyte stage produces egg and sperm that are both haploid. So you may want to color this particular one in after you get done copying the notes also. Now, we talked about the egg and the sperm here that the gametophyte stage produces. Well, that's our next section of the life cycle. So find this picture right here. Find this picture right here. It is a picture of the sperm. The antheridium produces sperm or antherozoids which swim in the water to fertilize the egg. So, if you know anything, usually when we're talking about egg and sperm, the egg is much, much bigger in size than what the sperm is. So if you're looking right here, these little things, these little dots are representing the sperm, the haploid sperm that the gametophyte is producing. Now these things right here are the gametophytes. These things here are the gametophytes. So this one is the egg, and this is the sperm of the gametophytes. So gametophytes right here. Little dots are the sperm. The big blue dot is the egg. The next part is the egg. The egg. Remember, what was the egg? The big blue section right here was the egg. The archegonium. The archegonium is the structure in gametophytes which produces and stores the ovum. So, this little yellow area is that archegonium, with the egg is right inside of that particular area. So the archegonium is the structure in gametophytes that produces and stores the ovum, which is the egg. Now this should leave us with our final part of the life cycle of a non-vascular plant. That is the zygote. The zygote. Now, a zygote is when the egg is fertilized by the sperm. So, within the archegonium, the sperm fertilizes the egg, and the zygote, which is diploid, is created. That zygote, that diploid, will develop into the sporophyte, the 2N, which sprouts from the gametophyte. So, if you remember the very first picture that we did, we said the sporophyte was like the stalk on top of the gametophyte. So, what will happen is that egg that was right here inside the archegonium grows. It's fertilized by the sperm, and it grows, and it develops into the sporophyte. So, when we had that very first picture where we had the spores coming out of the sporophyte, we have both the gametophyte and the sporophyte stage. Now, one important thing to remember, okay? And I think you should know this, that in terms of haploid and diploid, which is which? Which is the diploid part? Okay? Which is the diploid part? Well, let's go back and remember. What's diploid? Diploid is 2N. So which is the diploid part of this particular, let's say, moss? What's the diploid part? What's 2N? What do you think? What's 2N? The sporophyte. Okay? So the sporophyte in the life cycle of this moss and the sporophyte in the life cycle of the moss is 2N. You might want to highlight that. What one is just the haploid? Just the N. The gametophyte. So you probably in your notes there want to highlight that to make sure you remember that. The sporophyte is 2N. The gametophyte is just N. So gametophytes are haploid. Sporophytes are diploid.